Hello and welcome to today's presentation. Companies today need real-time visibility, advanced notification of issues, and efficient root cause analysis. Only then can they act fast and create extraordinary customer experiences. That's why we've put together this presentation. It highlights some of our experiences, especially with the monitoring of MuleSoft application networks. Before we get started, I want to quickly remind you that this session will be recorded. We'll send over a recording of this webinar later today. Our speakers today are well-known experts for enterprise integration and monitoring. Hendrik is Managing Director and CTO here at Integration Matters, and Errol is Director and Principal Technology Strategist at Psyncopate, a leading digital transformation professional services firm in the US. As MuleSoft partners, Integration Matters and Psyncopate are members of the fastest growing API and connectivity ecosystem. We leverage API-led connectivity to enable transformational outcomes for our customers. Psyncopate has helped many MuleSoft customers solve connectivity challenges, reduce complexity, automate processes, and gain greater visibility. Integration Matters has been an active member of the global MuleSoft community since 4 years. We provide the tools and expertise necessary to monitor end-to-end processes and measure business outcomes. Psyncopate is a premier Integration Matters partner for North America. So this is our short agenda for today. Hendrik will share his thoughts about how to create the best monitoring strategy, one that will provide the ability to see sooner and act faster. And he will give a live demo of a monitoring scenario. Errol will then talk about some best practices and will introduce a customer use case. And now I'll hand over to Hendrik.
Thank you, Birgit. And let's look into how to build a fantastic monitoring strategy. Building a successful monitoring strategy in an organization really requires 4 pillars. You need to have a clear goal. You need to have well-defined metrics, a design that is aligned with your business goals and customer experiences, and you need the right tooling for execution. Let's have a look into each of those 4 pillars. I'm sure everybody has experienced answers similar to those in this cartoon when trying to track down a problem. As today, businesses work with ever-increasing processes, technologies, software, systems, and infrastructures, the risk of such scenario increases dramatically. and the result is no laughing matter. It leads to upset customers, a waste of valuable resources, revenue loss, and damage to brand reputation. In our competitive business world, it is crucial to immediately know what processes went wrong at exactly which point. Monitoring gives you high visible insight into how your processes work and how any issue that may have an impact on customer experience. This should also include knowledge about data missing, so that your customers do not experience what you're seeing in this cartoon. Metrics do not represent problems. They represent a state, they give insight, and in a perfect world, they can be graphed. In an ideal world, you would track everything related to your processes from the very beginning of a case, everything that makes up the process, all the data that is carried along the process. But in practice, you select only the critical metrics to be able to define alerts based on them. Technical metrics may include service status, availability, error rates, run rates, or resource utilization. Business metrics, on the other hand, are related to customer experience and operational excellence. We will use both of them to identify the end-to-end value chain, the bottlenecks and issues. During a MuleSoft Connect conference that I attended a few years back, I attended a presentation given by James and Triplett those days the lead integration engineer at Airbnb. He was talking about architecting reliability and visibility into integrations, and Jameson came up with this maturity model to find out if integration worked as designed. And I'd love sharing this model with you and relay all the experiences they had, because I believe this perfectly matches what we have to say as a company. Really at the foundation, at level one in your monitoring strategy typically is that you just use the standard MuleSoft tools. You have a lot of log files, but you have virtually no real visibility into these processes apart from inspecting those log files. As your monitoring requirements grow, you will enter level 2, which means you have a database that allows for basic visibility into processes, and engineers can quickly figure out and answer questions without having the need to access the log files. Now, some companies may have used relational databases, others may have used log aggregation tools, but in general, that gives you like level 2. The next level in this is that users can start helping themselves. They can probably log into a little portal that grants access to privileged data based on their role. And they can answer their own questions, such as what error happened, how often does it happen, what is the transaction that failed. And as they start using that more and more, demand for your custom-built monitoring solution will grow, and you eventually have to enter level 4, where users can actually control and fix their own problems. I would love, as an engineer, if I'm not involved in any of these troubleshooting things. That's what I call a reliable monitoring solutions. Users know what the integration worked, users are able to reply messages, they can interact with the process, and probably fix 90% or more of their problems without ever involving IT or the help desk. Your path through these degrees of maturity typically will be that you will look into existing custom logging frameworks. You either build yourself custom logging frameworks. You've done that probably. We have been there many times before in our lives. For example, you redirect all your log data into Elastic, or you probably use available open source logging frameworks from GitHub, or you put it all into Splunk and try to get reports out of that. Now, what that all requires is a heavy degree of customization of your processes to exactly log the data that you're interested in, so that you, once you dig it out in your log files again, you can make sense of all of that. You might have seen monitoring extensions for MuleSoft. There are some commercials out there, commercial applications out there provided by like AppDynamics or Splunk. Some of them are even natively available in the platform. And they are commercially off-the-shelf Anypoint monitoring solutions. One of them being the MuleSoft Titanium offering, and the other one in the market available today, nJAMS, the product we really want to talk about today. Birgit mentioned in her opening that we want to have a little demo. So let's look into the scenario that we have prepared. A short background on us. Actually, we are pioneers in monitoring automated business processes running on large-scale integration platforms. We started development of the product back in 2009, and we launched the first version of our nJAMS monitoring solution back in 2011, and have then been continuously adding and expanding the monitoring functionality. Our passion is monitoring because we believe that there's a real magic in operational data. It can mean the difference between mediocrity, and brilliance for our customers or your customer's experience. We always have the end-to-end process and the business goal in mind when we do monitoring. Our customer come from virtually every industry all over the world. Just a few clients you can see on the slides. When we ask them what they want to know about the status of their operations, this is what they told us. They wanted to understand the status of a certain business process and how well it has been executed. its outcome, its performance, its well-being, basically. They wanted transparency to reach the ultimate goal of operational excellence, and they were looking for a solution at scale. Now, what you might figure from that slide, from these things that have been relevant to our customers, is they were not interested into, is that server up or down? Is that bandwidth being utilized or not? Their focus really was, is the business running? Is that end-to-end process working as expected? Are we delivering on the promise? And what we see is a fundamental change in monitoring away from the pure resource monitoring, so to speak, like the CPUs and the memory and the network bandwidth and so on, down to business goals. Is my process working? Does it succeed? Is it meeting the SLAs that we defined? So how do we do that? nJAMS enables your development, your operations and business teams to manage their business processes, to ensure their reliable performance and to achieve superior business results. Well, we collect all the data that flows through your integration platform. So we see the business data as well as the technical data, which allows us to identify issues which may or actually do impact the performance of your processes. And all these collected metrics allow us to create alerts and respond to issues in real time. Obviously, we can put it on dashboards and have nice reports for you to look at long-term trends. The product is designed to work with cloud-based integration solutions like the MuleSoft Cloud Hub. It is hosted, it is available as a SaaS solution, and you can connect it to all your cloud deployments, whether you run your MuleSoft environment in Cloud Hub, or if you run it in a VPC, like in the Google Cloud or in Microsoft Azure, makes really no difference to solutions built on nJAMS. The demo I'd like to talk about shows process monitoring in a large-scale environment. And we have developed a little demo scenario based on real-time global flight data. So let me introduce you to that hardware and software architecture that we put in place for our demo that is processing the flight data. What you see here is a hybrid setup of where we run Mule runtimes in Kubernetes and on different hardware that is provisioned in our labs. Now, we communicate over a messaging framework, and we even use third-party software like Elasticsearch clusters to store flight data and retrieve flight data and display that. It should give you an impression about the heterogeneous environments that today's integration software typically runs in, and the challenges that come with monitoring across these different hardware and software installations. So let me log into the real demo system and show you some use cases on how to use the product. nJAMS grants you users role-based access to all the transactional data and recorded data of your MuleSoft flows. So like on the left side, you will see the hierarchy of your Mule domains, if any, of your Mule runtimes, of the flows deployed. And that allows you to easily navigate through all the recorded processes and all the data and find transactions that may have caused a problem. In the middle section of the screen, you'll find all the recorded transactions. And once you click on one of those, you will get a graphical representation of the real execution of that flow instance. You can blend in execution data. You see the execution path, so you can exactly track how the transaction was executed within the runtime and which data has been used. We see all the correlated other flows that have been used in this scenario. Like, for example, when I look into this transaction where I return flight information from a public flight data website, I see that this is the last step out of 5 steps of a chain process. So the first Mule flow started here. This invokes a set of other processes using REST APIs. And I can click on each of these, easily being grouped because they share the same correlation ID, and inspect for every single flow which process, which component has been executed. I can extract metadata. For example, here, I extracted the aircraft type to make it visible on the UI. I get the call sign of the flight. I get flight IDs, which makes it very easy for me to track down if something goes wrong, what was the data that has been used and what was the error that was created. All the data that is used during a transaction is automatically recorded and can be inspected, given you have the right privileges. And you can use that data for full text search. For example, if we want to find all data, all flows that dealt with the DLH flight ID that I put up here, I can just do a full text search and it pulls out all the flows that dealt with that piece of business data, and it automatically correlates that with all the other flows that participated in that end-to-end transaction. I have built-in reports to give me information about availability and historic availability of my interfaces. I can have SLA-based dashboards, which give me average durations, which categorize if transactions are at normal speed or if they're slow or not. I have transactions and error heat maps so that I can easily spot if there's a certain hour of the day or day of the week where I have an increased error rate. All this is fully customizable based on all the metrics that we return. So let's talk about best practices when we employ such a solution. I would like to hand over to Ariel, who is my co-host for this webinar today. Ariel, what are your thoughts? How did the monitoring requirements from your customers change over the years?
Hi, Hendrik. Thanks. That was absolutely terrific. And Birgit, thanks so much for inviting me to this webinar. I think it's very, very insightful. And what I've seen over the last couple of decades is that the goals of monitoring, enterprise monitoring, haven't really changed. And you can see that in the right icons. I mean, you need to have people interfacing with transactions and processes, and there's applications and databases and servers and networks, and all that is generating revenue for companies or reducing costs. And those goals haven't really changed, but the complexity has soared with the movement, to API-led microservices and the cloud. But really the goals are the same. And what I've seen and some of the best practices is that in the older world, business services, they were transaction-based, primarily application-intensive, end-user directive, and IT people have to effectively manage lots of components, like I just mentioned, the network, servers, databases, web services, storage, applications, etc., as well as security. And most of this used to be on-prem, and in fact, most of the world, I think, still runs on-prem as they move to the cloud in their hybrid journey. And everybody is seeing these components as independent entities and having their own siloed monitoring strategy. So in almost all the IT enterprises that I've talked to or worked with, when a problem arises, analysis takes a long time. So the mean time to recovery, or the MTTR, takes a whole lot of time, to fix. Although attempts are made to consolidate, coordinate monitoring efforts, there tends to be a lack of centralized governance. Sometimes that's within one part of the organization, or of course, many organizations have multiple divisions, and it's difficult not to get into that siloed mentality. So while a great deal of good data is being collected, as Hendrik mentioned on statistics, the lack of a centrally defined roles, responsibilities, tends to result in tribal knowledge of individual monitoring components, the people that use those with little or no integration, as Hendrik referenced earlier in the presentation. Now, in the newer world, the goals are the same, but you have to add the complexity of things like RESTful service flows and subflows and more subflows that you need to correlate and monitor. Also in the new world, error handling is one of the major changes introduced, especially in MuleSoft 4. It's better, it's more efficient, but arguably it's more complex. The message exceptions can now be handled at 3 different levels: application, flow, processor levels. Your monitoring needs to understand and help make the exceptions easier and quicker to resolve, because even in the world of cloud computing, things do break. Throw in the fact that your services may be running on different platforms, different clouds, and multiple software technology flows from one vendor that needs to be integrated to another flow from another vendor on a different cloud platform, and you start to get the picture of the complexity. Now, specifically, some of the detailed MuleSoft service management things that need to be measured, and some are done by Titanium and others can be significantly complemented by nJAMS, are API response time, back-end call response time, total transaction volume, endpoint failures, and the need for a replay of those failures, payload data, alerting and searching, and really needing a graphical process visualization, as you saw in the demo. These last 2 points are critical. Having a graphical representation of each flow that can be stored, reviewed, and documented over a period of time that you, the end user, can define. The other item to measure is design time metrics. You know, the ultimate goal of API-led development is the reuse of assets: RAML, OAS, flows, global air handling, and business domains. And that's super important to make sure you're getting the value out of your platform. So specifically, an example customer that I wanted to give you some insight about is a healthcare services company, and they had a number of challenges, and they had a significant investment in technology and wanted to leverage those investments in order to achieve, its corporate mission. Although many of the applications making up the platform could be categorized as legacy, the company planned for modernization initiatives that included MuleSoft, since they did own it, the imminent introduction of Oracle Cloud ERP, which they were moving to in the cloud, and other investments that were intended to improve their competitive edge. The company is now heavily leveraging MuleSoft and cloud application technology. The shift to Microsoft, hosted by the Microsoft API-led processes, is an important differentiator for them, with potential significant returns on investment as the organization goes through its digital transformation, much like many of the companies that are striving for today. And nJAM is being implemented to provide monitoring support for that, specifically, number 1, to define production support processes. So there is the monitoring, but there's also the definition of the processes that need to occur. So support and escalation procedures that will ensure that the right people are involved when an issue is reported, that management escalation occurs when a service level agreement is violated, super important point, and that the issue is properly closed and resolved and documented, so if it happens again, the resolution can be even quicker. Number 2, creating required alerts. For CPU, memory utilization, there's many tools that can do that. For worker or application issues and application metric thresholds, and for the alerts to notify the appropriate support individuals who are tasked with issue resolution. Number 3, configuring high availability. Clients will depend on services deployed in this cloud fashion, so redundancy is very important for the application as well as the monitoring platform, because if there isn't redundancy built into the platform, on the monitoring side, it does you no good. And in this particular use case, that was super critical for them. Creating exception handling strategy, number 4. Implement a cohesive exception handling strategy with the goal to apply it to all services, not just a couple. Add explicit logging at key points in the service and the processes in MuleSoft so that during troubleshooting, support personnel can move quickly to determine where and why a failure occurred. And last but not least, performance and tuning. Determine the capacity of the number of users or clients the services can handle before performance or stability degrades and the service becomes an issue. And that's super important as well, because the number of vCores that you're allocated, how to use those cost effectively, is really important in monitoring as well. To the right, you can see some of the results that have been achieved through this implementation. In summary, capturing some of the key nJAMS features that I've seen implemented at our joint customers in this case study and highlighted earlier by Hendrik to get the most out of your Anypoint platform are the ability to view specific individual transactions by processor and the payload data, as you saw in the demo. Capture the state of a flow and replay that service on demand. I have a number of customers that one feature alone justifies the use of nJAMS. Dynamic real-time date range reporting based upon all available storage configured. So that's super important as well. Having that date range is only effective if you've got all the information within that data range that your contract and your storage allows you to do, and also to real-time alerts by processor, not just the complete flow. And oh, by the way, Psyncopate is here to help with MuleSoft services as well as nJAMS services with integration matters as well. Just a short description of Psyncopate. We're a US-based integration and API consulting company. We have some of the brightest and most experienced architects in the industry, and I've worked with a number of different companies with some serious talent, and I think we have the best that I've ever worked with in my career. Our approach is to get to the point and get meaningful value from your integration platform through our align methodology. So we do that through helping assess your current and planned implementation, leveraging your existing assets as it makes sense versus a rip and replace. You've made investments and we'd like to leverage those if at all possible to make sense in your digital journey. Implement the technology shoulder to shoulder with your resources, thereby mentoring and educating and training. We want to make you self-sufficient over time, and the best way to do that is to be working shoulder to shoulder, whether that's on-prem or virtually or both. All along, our strategy is to gauge and narrow the scope of work and make your company self-sufficient after the initial success and for future successes, but we also offer lifeline services after the fact once the implementation's done. If there are short-term issues or questions that need immediate attention, we are there for you. To quote a line from a famous movie, hopefully you can guess what this is, no matter where you are, whether it's a quarter mile away or halfway across the world, Psyncopate is there for you. Now, Brigitte, maybe you can guess the name of the movie, and I'll throw it back to you.
Hi, Aaron. I hope it is Fast and Furious. Am I correct?
You are correct.
Oh, thanks. So thank you very much for sharing your insights and a customer experience with us. That's very helpful. And thanks to Hendrik as well. So I would like to wrap up and share some more best practices. So when you think about creating your monitoring, our recommendation is to begin with the end in mind. Develop a strategy to support the expanding and increasingly complex IT monitoring needs of your digital business. Unfortunately, there is no one-size-fits-all monitoring solution. Select the best solution for your environment and your resources to see sooner, whether it's a custom framework, an extended standard monitoring tool, or a dedicated off-the-shelf solution like nJAMS. So, as you have seen, you are not alone when designing and executing your monitoring solution. Take advantage of your MuleSoft ecosystem, benefit, for example, from Syncopate's experience with other customers. Business performance is the only thing that really matters in terms of the goals of your IT monitoring activities. Use business relevant metrics to initiate monitoring from the business perspective. And know your audience. How can you make their jobs easier, that they can act faster? Prepare custom dashboards or reports with relevant information and use their favorite alerting method. And finally, when evaluating a monitoring tool, your proof of concept should always have a defined set of goals. Select a use case to solve one critical issue or implement one requirement from your stakeholders. For a detailed look at nJAMS, sign up now at cloudintegrationmatters.com. The only thing you need for your registration is your email address. With this free basic subscription, you have everything you need to begin monitoring your internal and external APIs and integrations within 5 minutes. Thank you for being with us today. We appreciate everyone joining the webinar. Please feel free to contact us for any questions. We also look forward to your feedback, which helps us tailor the content for upcoming webinars. Hendrik and Errol, is there anything else you would like to add?
Birgit, thank you so much for allowing us to participate in your webinar. I think it was very educational, and I appreciate your support.
Thank you, Errol, for sharing today's hours with us and sharing all the experience you made with Psyncopate, introducing the fantastic partnership we have. Nothing else from my side. Thanks for everybody watching and attending. Looking forward to being in contact with you anytime soon.
Yeah, thanks. We hope to see you again next time, and take care.